This is Radio 314 on the Red Ice Radio Network.
Hello, and thanks for tuning in. This is Lana. Before we bring on my guest, State of Nation, I wanted to let you know that we've started a live stream show on Saturdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. Central European Time, exclusively for our Red Ice members. It's called Weekend Warrior. Hendrik and I talk about the latest news, events, and whatever else we feel like. We do really short snippets of a few segments, but not the full show. So if you're a member, log into redicemembers.com on Saturdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. We also have a private chat enabled for our members. Things are much more fun behind the curtain. Also, we will be live streaming from both the Republican and Democratic conventions. We need volunteers who can help film, provide security, be correspondents, and those who can simply be there with our group. So if you live in Cleveland, Ohio, or Philadelphia, please get in touch with me. My guest today is the young and talented State of Nation. That's the name of his YouTube channel, where he covers topics pertaining to European identity, culture, and survival. His most popular video was called Nationalism in 90 Seconds. We'll talk about some topics he thinks are mistakenly intertwined with the concept of nationalism and counterproductive strategies that could be cut out when spreading the nationalist message. What is the most effective, best way to win over more people and stop preaching to the choir? This and much more with State of Nation up next. State of Nation, welcome to the program. Thanks for being here.
Hello, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
So you're in Italy. I want to know, how's the refugee invasion in Italy these days? What's going on?
To be honest, okay, so I'm in the very south of Italy, a place called Bari, and there's a huge port in Bari. Actually, very recently, an English Islamist was arrested here on charges of terror. But in terms of refugees and the immigrant situation here, Bari is incredibly homogenous, if you can call any southern Italian city homogenous, that is. But people here that aren't Italian, and by extension I mean people here that aren't European, are of incredibly low status. I think the demography here is 2% non-Italian, people that are residents here. So really, I'm living in a place that is very incubated from these problems.
Oh, very nice. And are they really infected with liberalism and PC, or are they more laid back?
Oh, yeah, of course. Everyone that I know is a communist. But apart from... No, on that note, though, are you familiar with Casa Pound?
No.
In Italy, Casa Pound is a neo-fascist organization in Italy. Very, very Italian, thoroughly Italian organization, but they are basically the premier right-wing youth organization in this country. They're quite big. They're able to mobilize easily 1,000 students and things like that. They've done a very good job at mobilizing student populations. Casa Pound have actually recently opened headquarters here in Bari. And so and I'm in very close relations with the people that are in charge of that. So that's a very interesting progression.
Yeah, I've been trying to reach out to people in Italy, wanted to talk about their fascist past and, kind of get a different spin on it. But it's hard because of the language barrier. I mean, do you find a lot of people that speak English there?
No.
Yeah.
No, I kind of go to social groups and swim from group to group. Parla inglese, and hope that I find someone. Yeah, it's very difficult to find English speakers here, but there are enough to get by. And to be honest, I should be less lazy and integrate and learn the language.
It's so hard, though, because everyone speaks English in Europe now. I had that in Sweden. I married a Swede. I want to practice my Swedish, and then everyone else wants to speak English with me all the time. So then I don't get to learn Swedish.
And the Swedes speak English better than most English people.
It's
so
true.
What's the point?
So I have to ask, how did you come to identify as a nationalist? How did that happen for you?
I'm 24 now. I was about 17. So it was 2009. In England, and things were ballooning with the BNP. Prior to this, I was an ardent, open borders, for all intents and purposes, Marxist, really. I wouldn't have put that label on it. Yeah, I wouldn't have put that label on it myself if asked. But looking back on it, that's what I was. I definitely was anti-nation state. And I remember my best friend at the time was a gay fella who was also Malaysian. And oddly enough, he supported the BNP.
That's funny.
Of course. So I used to get in common arguments with him, and eventually I'd concede that, okay, if you believe in the nation state, then your best option is the BNP. Otherwise, what is the point in a nation state without immigration controls, etc.? But anyway, the time came when Nick Griffin was to appear on Question Time. And this was quite a big deal in the UK. This was the first time any nationalist figurehead had been given a platform on Question Time, like a political debate show in the UK. I watched this with a bellicose attitude to Griffin. I didn't like him at all. To be honest, I didn't know much about him, but from what I'd heard, I didn't like him. And so I watched it to see him get trounced, basically. And he did get trounced. He gave an absolutely terrible performance in my mind. But watching the way that he was treated by all of the establishment politicians, it instantly got me thinking. And they completely changed the format of the show. The audience was invariably incredibly hostile to him. And I thought, on that basis alone, I don't trust any of these politicians, so why should I trust their distaste of him? Mm-hmm. So I started reading BNP literature. I was never taken in with the party themselves, but through that I discovered David Duke, and from there I discovered the European Alternative Right, or the European New Right, I think was the name of the movement, with Alain de Benoist and people like that. Mm-hmm. And that's what really sowed the seeds for me. It was their work.
Oh, that's great. You're only 24. Wow, that's awesome. You have your whole life ahead of you. So do you think a lot of people in your generation are going to be like you? They're going to wake up and say, yeah, nationalism is the way?
No.
No?
No. Not unless nationalism changes itself quite considerably. These progressions with the alt-right, which have happened very, very recently, are incredibly promising. But the problem is that the battle they're fighting is it's too weighed heavily against them.
Yeah.
Anyone with status in the UK, with cultural capital, with who has any sort of status in the society, so middle class, white, university educated, the default for them is going to be incredibly hostile because they'll have gone to university, they'll have made friends with a hugely diverse group of people. And now, of course, that's not to say that nationalism as a prerequisite denies you the ability to make friends with people from a variety of backgrounds, but it can make things more difficult. Also, the people that we need to reach are the people that are distanced from the problems that multiculturalism creates. And so it's very hard for you to show people these issues and for them to have any sort of visceral gut attachment to them. So
it's true. It seems like the people that are easiest to recruit are the ones that live in diverse areas and have had to deal with some problems, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of a vicious circle because I don't mean this in an elitist way. I really don't. But the people that are having to live in these diverse areas tend to be unskilled workers. They tend to be people that aren't able to articulate themselves in ways that are considered decent, especially when expressing these issues. And that further alienates more middle-class whites from identifying with nationalism, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was saying, where's the natural aristocracy that's more nationalist-based? It's like it's missing. I don't see it anywhere. Do you?
No, but the aristocracy is still race-based. And it is still race-based. It's just how whiteness has manifested itself. I did a video on white privilege that kind of goes into this a little bit. Because one way that I try to deal with this narrative of white privilege isn't by denying white privilege. It's instead about talking, what do you mean by white privilege? Because the idea of white privilege in and of itself has to posit an invariable white identity. Okay, so whiteness is one discrete thing, blackness is another discrete thing, when actually it's not all white people that benefit from white privilege. Of course, a corporate executive has a lot more privilege than a neo-Nazi skinhead, for example. I'm going to sound a little bit like an intersectional feminist here. But the point is that white privilege is only really accorded to you if you deny your whiteness. The moment your whiteness becomes explicit, the moment you say, I am white, I'm going to politically mobilize as white, you lose that privilege and you become a racist. You become something else. So we still do have a race-based aristocracy, and these people know what they're doing. In the alt-right, we refer to them, as everyone knows, as virtue signalers, and they're doing it to accord themselves with social status, and that status in itself is a racial identity, whether they want to admit it or not.
Well, you did this great video, Nationalism in 90 Seconds. I think I cut off about 7 seconds in the beginning, but let me play it here.
The Earth is a diverse place. Thousands of ethnicities, over 6,000 languages, over 4,000 religions, and every multiplicity in between. Humans are a diverse species that have found innumerable ways to live and love, fight and function. Nationalism recognizes that each one of these groups is special, each one unique and valuable in and of itself. Nationalism recognizes the disasters of colonialism and the perils of globalization. Nationalism stands against assimilation that contributes to the ongoing destruction of the Earth's rich diversity. In general, people gravitate to those like their own. People support interests and policies of benefit to themselves. Different groups vote for policies to help them, creating demographic enmity. Nationalism recognizes difference. People are different. People flourish in different environments. Nationalism is about creating positive environments to suit the needs of the group. There is no one-size-fits-all. Whether we be Australian Aboriginals, Palestinians, Indian nationalists, Native Americans, Englishmen, Israelis, Black South Africans, Afrikaan Boers, we're all willing for the same thing: our culture and our people. Our culture is not something to relegate to the museum for future generations. Our culture is for future generations. This is our commitment.
Well, I thought that was great. You summarized it beautifully in 90 seconds. I would also add, too, that people always think that a nation is just government, right? They don't think of it as a tribe. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, that's why I chose the name State of Nation. Because a state can be two things. It can be an emotional experience, a state of happiness, a state of sadness, etc., or it can be a nation state. So it's trying to differentiate between that conception that people have. A nation is a self-identified ethnic group, I think, to keep it as simple as possible.
So I got to talk about this because a lot of people have these major misconceptions when you say nationalism, right? They always think Nazis right away or genociding other groups. So tell us some of the common misconceptions. Maybe I just said what they were.
Well, the idea of genocide is an interesting one because nationalism, by its definition in itself, negates the prospect of genocide. Now, I'm going to probably disagree with many people in saying this because many people see cultural relativism as something that is hostile to nationalism or hostile to the alternative right. But I think it's actually an integral part of it. I think any nationalist that is supremacist or believes that that their country or their society is better than another, I think that belief in and of itself kind of requires a colonialist predisposition. Because if you do genuinely believe that your society is the best, then surely it's a moral thing to try and colonize other groups and try and inculcate other groups in your cultural ways. Hence we have Western colonialism. That was definitely not a product of nationalism. Nationalism is cultural relativism applied. Cultural relativism is the belief that every group, every culture has a value in and of itself and therefore deserves the right of protection. That's literally all nationalism is. Anything else you add to nationalism is your personal political qualms. It has nothing to do with nationalism in essence, I don't think.
I was spying on some of the comments on your videos and you responded to someone and you said, I hate it when people compound nationalism with other irrelevant shit, which I thought was kind of funny. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, people often compound nationalism with issues related to, well, anything. Homosexuality is a big one. Feminism is a big one. Gender issues, of course, issues relating to Judaism. These can be obstacles, potentially, to nationalism. Not necessarily, but potentially they can be obstacles. And therefore, limited talk should maybe be granted to them. All I would say on that is this. We are already in a position where our beliefs aren't exactly greeted amorously by the majority of people. The last thing we want to do is attach to that already low status belief is compound it with other beliefs that are also going to record us lower status, okay? So already as it stands, a belief in lowering immigration or stopping immigration, regardless of how many people agree with it, is seen as a low status belief. Mm-hmm. Coupling that with homophobia, coupling that with other things as well, isn't really going to help us. I think Jared Taylor was questioned quite a long time ago on why he doesn't talk about the Jews very much. I think he said this at a London Forum meeting in England. And he replied back saying, I can only afford to be a quack on one issue. And I think that's probably the best reply. It's they're tangents that at this point aren't important, especially with something like homosexuality, for example. When we're facing complete demographic annihilation, the last thing I'm honestly caring about is who people are having sex with, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, does nationalism have to be right-wing? Because I think I told you in a note, there's also a left-wing that's, or alt-left that's slowly forming.
I don't really know what right-wing and left-wing mean. But in any case, right and left have become identity categories that people ascribe to themselves when they act politically. And as a result of that, it's quite hard to change how people see themselves. It's quite hard to make a left-wing person then come to identify as right. I think the best tool is to reframe the language that you use, or just avoid conversations that mention right and left-wing oppositions. I try not to even mention them. Obviously, nationalism doesn't have to be left-wing or right-wing. It can be anything. Nationalists, frankly, should stop squabbling about irrelevant shit, again, about left and right, because it's not important to us, not at this point, I don't think.
And what about liberalism? How do you see that colliding with nationalism?
Right, this is a big question.
I know liberalism in America is different than, England and everywhere else.
Yeah, if I'm talking about, what liberalism are you referring to? Are you referring to classical liberalism, or are you referring to Democrat liberalism?
Yeah, Democrat, today's modern day politics, I suppose. Multiculturalism, equality, all of that nonsense.
Okay, well, it depends, because one is kind of an outgrowth of the other, I think. Talking about, because classical liberalism in and of itself, I don't think can really deny mass immigration. I think if you take a classical liberal stance, in and of it is eventually going to lead to an Americanized liberalism. If you believe in the equality of all people, in the universality of the category of human, that everyone is a rational human being able to harness their agency in a capitalist world, I think on that basis, one is necessarily going to stem from the other.
Because really, I mean, it's really coming down to globalists versus nationalists. And when I look at liberals and a lot of leftists in Europe and America, they're globalists, right? And no one ever talks about the negative side of globalization and universal thinking, do they?
No, they don't. And people tend to assume that universal thinking is a positive thing. The big contradiction here is universal thinking coupled with globalism, because universal thinking applied universally undermines itself. It has to undermine itself. The only universal that we really have in the world is difference. People behave differently, cultures are different, languages are different, religions are different, and as a result, people are always going to behave differently in a society, and that's going to necessarily result in different outcomes. Globalism, as a result, by definition, is going to result in mass inequality. This doesn't necessarily have to be due to racial distinctions. These could all be cultural creations. I have no idea. I'm not really interested in that debate. But when you have a mass of different cultures living together under one nation state, as globalism would support, different cultures are going to, as I said, behave differently. Some cultures are going to put huge stress on the accumulation of wealth. Other cultures are going to put huge stress on familial affiliation, on religion, and all these different things. And as a result of that, wealth inequality is an inevitable part of that. You can either embrace that wealth inequality and say, okay, it's just a side effect, but of course that is going to give rise to certain objections by certain groups that are going to be suffering from that, or you can try and eliminate those differences, and that, I think, is equally undesirable.
Yeah, you did a great video about resisting assimilation, which had a lot of good meaty stuff in there, and you basically explain how liberalism, it is supremacist, right? And I mean, they're obsessed with making everyone the same, aren't they? Why are they obsessed with that? Because
it's necessary in capitalism. Capitalism has to necessarily commodify things. This isn't a critique of capitalism. It's a critique of capitalism coupled with liberalism. It stems back to the European Enlightenment, the belief that, again, in universals, that's where the belief in universals come from. The disinterested accumulation of wealth that I've mentioned before. You need to believe, if you are going to live in a capitalist society, you need to believe that everyone is essentially the same. Otherwise, you are essentially saying mass inequality is a good thing. And most people don't want to admit that, and I personally wouldn't admit that either. I think if you want to live in a society that values sameness, you have to be in a racially or culturally, linguistically homogenous society. Again, it's just a very common contradiction that people don't seem to analyze that much.
Yeah, you did a good job. You're explaining basically the desire for assimilation or forcing assimilation is actually creating extremism, right? They're resisting to melting into that pot of sameness, right?
Exactly, because people don't want to be the same. People have cultural identities that they want to keep. The existence of indigenous tribes still today is complete proof of that. The existence or the upsurge of Islamism is proof of that. People are not interested in your rationality. People are not interested in your 9 to 5 work ethic. People don't care. People have other aspirations. And it's your duty to understand that and to admit to yourself that, okay, if you live in a centralized nation state with all of these different peoples, you're going to get conflict. You cannot live in a society like that and escape that.
Yeah, people have a lot of utopian ideas. I also hear, too, that people think just because now we can buy things from all over the world, we can go online, we can talk to people everywhere, travel anywhere, that we should also be able to just migrate and live wherever we want. What do you think about that idea?
Well, there are so many aspects of globalization that I absolutely adore. And it really has hit home to me, especially since living in Italy, living in southern Italy. I can't get the food that I want to eat anywhere, Lana. It's absolutely impossible. If I want a curry, for example, I can't get it here. I have to live off focaccia, pizza, pasta. I'm sick of it. I want a little bit of globalization, the cultural exchange. But in terms of the people need to understand that people are not economic units.
Yeah.
People don't live on their own without enacting any sort of political change or voicing any upsets, especially if you're in a democracy. Couple this as well. All I've said, couple it with democracy. And democracy essentially becomes a battle of demography. Different ethnic groups squabbling to try and get their share of the nation's dividend. It's impossible. You cannot treasure your beliefs. Okay, this is a very common retort that liberals always say to immigration. And it's what the majority of my English friends say. If I mention to them, for example, London is now 40% white British, does that bother you? Do you have no feelings about that at all? And this is the thing, they have no feelings about that. Mm-hmm. They don't care. They don't necessarily think it's good. But at the same time, telling them that this is a negative thing is talking Greek. They have no idea of what the consequences of this are. And this is the thing, this is what they don't understand. The very question of why does this matter is in and of itself a product of their culture. The fact that they are even thinking to say our demographics don't matter is the result of the beliefs of their ancestors, is the result of the very specific ideological trends that have created our societies. And it does matter because you're asking the question, why does it matter? As soon as white people become minorities, permanent minorities in these places, very small minorities, no one will be asking the why does it matter question anymore. Mm-hmm. All other groups will be trying to maintain their hegemony.
Yeah, it's amazing. White people, really, we're the last people to think about race. I mean, I didn't think about it my whole life up until really a few years ago. I mean, seriously, because once you analyze the news and all the propaganda, I started saying, wow, everything is anti-white. So it kind of forced me to get into the question of race. So how did it happen for you? Because maybe some other people, just that switch hasn't flipped. It hasn't dawned on them yet, because I see a lot of people last couple of years, it's just dawned on them. And there's been just floods of people coming in and waking up to what's going on.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for many nationalists to remember, because when I was young and I first got involved in nationalism, I was a man on a mission, I think. It became almost an obsession and I wanted to convert everyone. Obviously, that's not going to help. But I think what is helpful for all nationalists to remember is to remember that when they were born and when they were young and when they were teenagers, most likely, perhaps even young adults, they did not share these beliefs. And if someone mentioned these beliefs to them, they would feel a sort of visceral disgust. I remember, this again comes back to the time that Nick Griffin was on Question Time. There was a Facebook group at the time that wanted to ban Nick Griffin from Question Time. And I was just perusing it, seeing what they were saying, seeing what the fuss was about this guy. And they had quotes from Nick Griffin on the side, on the About section. And one of them was Nick Griffin talking about interracial marriage or something like that. And he was saying that it's probably not beneficial for the for either party. It's not beneficial for the children. And I remember reading that and feeling a really visceral disgust and thinking, how dare this man say this? What a disgusting thing to say. And now I look back on a question like that and I think, yeah, it's probably true. Whatever, I'm not really that fussed. But it doesn't elicit that guttural response. It's a huge taboo in Western societies to even broach something like that. So I think most people recognize certain differences. Most people do recognize certain differences in behavior. Most would say that this is due to culture rather than genetic predisposition. And regardless of what the cause is, it doesn't really matter. The fact is they exist. I don't think the route for nationalism is going to be in recognizing differences and recognizing the issue of race. I really don't. I think the only way nationalism is really going to get a segue is about in belief in yourself, belief in your own culture, and just the recognition that it's something beautiful and worth preserving.
Like as the identity movements across Europe, a lot of the youth are into that, yeah.
I think that's it. To take the example of Casa Pound in Italy, I've got in many heated discussions with people in Casa Pound over the topic of race, asking them, do they care about it, do they not? And a lot of them don't care. A lot of them find it a completely irrelevant topic. Because the fact is, most people that are not ethnically Italian aren't going to be joining Casa Pound anyway. And it's more of a movement for empowering the indigenous Italians rather than being against the non-indigenous. So I think that's the route to go down. Where it currently stands in America, where it currently stands in England, mass deportations are not going to be occurring anytime soon. These people are in our societies, whether we like it or not. We can hate them, we can rail against them, but frankly, that is very exhausting.
Yeah.
The best thing you can do is build networks and stick by your own.
That's right. Yeah, it's got to be one of those things where we have to be so convicted of what we believe and who we are and love our culture and our people so much that it doesn't matter what the laws are because you're internally convicted of it, right? So even if the borders were wide open and they throw whatever culture at us, we're firm in who we are and we don't fall susceptible to it, right?
Exactly. And it pains me to say this, but a fantastic example of that is the Jews.
Explain.
In that, despite the fact that they have not had a nation state until relatively recently, they've still been able to maintain group identity, group loyalty, and a very intense sense of ethnic pride in who they are.
Yeah, it's true. I think, too, as soon as you start saying, like, if people talk about race mixing, oh, it should be illegal in the new ethno state, as soon as you start trying to push laws, that's a bad idea. People are always going to want to break laws. That's just not the way to do it. What do you think?
Well, also, the problem with a topic like miscegenation is I don't really know how relevant it is, Lana. It's a relatively small problem. I think
it's true. Mass immigration's the problem, really.
Exactly. And research actually demonstrates that the more diverse a community is, the more likely they are to marry their own kind rather than veer off differently. So miscegenation is not a problem. I think the nationalists that spend a lot of time talking about miscegenation have their own issues to deal with. I think I see it more. I know this is very similar to a leftist argument. Oh, if you're against gay people, then you're probably gay yourself. But I think a lot of it is due to issues of, I don't know, maybe sexual ostracism and things like that, rather than, because it seems to be young men that care most about this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's true. Most people are drawn to their own, and really, it's the numbers aren't as big. I know a lot of women do it in America. They want to get with other guys from other cultures and races because of what they see on TV, right? But I think if they were honest about it, they don't really want that. It's just kind of a trend. But there's always going to be exceptions. We have people that listen that are interracial marriages, and they love what we do, and they support what we do, and they sympathize with white people.
Exactly. And another thing is, God, sometimes I listen to myself and I think, what am I saying? But regardless of whether we want to be or not, we are in a multicultural society. And most people that we talk to will have a friend or will have a family member or will know someone in a mixed race relationship. I just think don't alienate people like that. We don't need to.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Well, you also did a video, 5 questions for progressives. And I know they're big questions, but I think it's good because when people are having a conversation with the leftists, they have to hit some of the weak spots, right? I think it's time that we start asking them questions and make them answer for what's going on. Why do they think that they're the morally superior ones, right? So what were some of these questions? What's good to ask a leftist?
Why is it a good thing, or why is it morally justifiable to make whites a minority in their lands? This works to some degree. The problem is that a lot of left-wing people, or a lot of normal people, shall I say, would say it's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it's just a thing, who cares? In which case, reframe it, why is it a bad thing if I object to this? Mm-hmm. If it's indifferent, if who cares, why does it matter, then why does it matter if I don't like it? Is immigration a punishment is also another good one, because a common reframe you see from people is, well, it was your societies that colonized other communities. It was your society that enacted a horrific foreign policy against Middle Eastern populations, take the migrant crisis, for example. So why is it not justified for these people to come here and settle here? But then the reframe to that, of course, is who are you exactly trying to punish? Because it wasn't us. It wasn't the population at large that voted for these foreign policies. It was the people in power. So you're trying to punish the people in power, but if you are trying to punish the people in power, it's the people in power that are enacting policies of mass immigration as well. Why is that? When is it not racist for whites to start pursuing their ethnic interests? Are whites forever damned to be an invisible minority if they do become one? The situation in South Africa, for example, where whites are a huge minority and are facing basically a genocide at present. Malema, very recently, who's a black leader in South Africa, has again inspired blacks to take up arms and start dispossessing whites of their land, saying whites have the right to their land. Now, can whites pursue their ethnic interests because they're a minority? Can whites pursue their ethnic interests when they're economically disenfranchised? At what point does that become okay? And then lastly, I think another important one is, are majority white communities immoral? Because most people that espouse this, that actively espouse this, are living in white majority communities. That's why they're able, that's why they have the privilege, the white privilege, to espouse these ideologies.
Now, have you had a lot of luck when you're arguing with leftists? Do you ever ask them some of these questions?
I tend not to bother.
Do you even argue with leftists is the question, or just walk away, or just throw them out the window?
Just laugh. The only time I would ever argue with a leftist is when other people are watching that could learn something from it. Otherwise, it's completely pointless. I remember at a lecture in university, because at university I studied social anthropology, which is a thoroughly Jewish, thoroughly social constructivist, postmodern, post-structuralist field. Mm-hmm. And in one of the lectures, the professor told us that racism is a product of whiteness. It's impossible to be non-white and racist. It's impossible to be anti-racist and white. And there was quite a lot of discord in the class. A lot of whites said, I don't agree with you on this. But I thought there's no point. There's no point in arguing in that way. The only point there is in arguing is making other people that probably feel the same as you not feel as alone, and let them know that other people feel the same. That's the only time. These people are ideologues. There's no point. Their arguments are becoming increasingly irrelevant anyway. Let them tire themselves out, I think.
So what kind of luck have you had, and what are your tactics if you're trying to convert friends or family or people that you love that are kind of on the fence? What are some ways that you can kind of open their eyes a bit? I always get this question from different people, because it is good that we work on the friends and family and the circles that we all have, right?
Yeah. One of the worries that I think families are going to have with something like this is they can view it in a bit of a cultish way, as if you've kind of been converted to some sort of fringe religious group or something like that. And the only retort you can have to this isn't in words, it's in actions. Just be a normal fucking person. Don't have loads of tattoos and things like that. Don't do all you can to alienate yourself. A lot of nationalists do this, especially young nationalists. And I've gone through this phase personally myself. You've just got to be a normal, healthy individual. It's become a bit of a truism to say that nationalist groups look for the disenfranchised, the socially ostracized. It should be the complete opposite. Nationalist groups should go for the healthy, the young, the ambitious, the normal. And I'm not saying that I'm any of these things. I'm just saying that that should be the strategy. You don't want to attract freaks because then you're going to get associated with those people whether you like it or not. It's one of the perils of identity. Everyone that also ascribes to themselves that identity, you're going to get tarred with the same brush.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. And I also find sometimes people can, it's almost like there's a religious aspect to it. They can almost become religious zealots, very judgmental even of each other. It's like, it's okay to be laid back and also have a sense of humor and be light and easy about some things, right?
Exactly. This is what I found, again, to go back to Casapound in Italy, who I think young people could learn a lot from. I don't like using this as a buzzword, but it's very diverse. People have all sorts of different opinions, different views, but they have the bare bones framework that they can all coalesce around. And that's what we need. It's not about, a lot of people talk about ethnomasochism and things like that, and that whites constantly try and one-up themselves of, yeah, I really like black people. Oh, yeah, well, I hate white people. I hate myself. I'm more moral than you. And a lot of nationalists kind of do the same. Like, oh, I don't think the Holocaust happened. Oh, I think the Holocaust happened, and it was a good thing. It's just stupid. You don't need to do that to show your fidelity to the cause. Ideological fidelity to that extent is incredibly counterproductive. Again, when it comes to friends and family, if they want to talk about it with you, talk to them about it in a rational, calm way. Don't be that dick at a dinner table that will not shut up about their politics. That is
Yeah, don't be that guy. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, basically simplicity, right? Isn't that the best way to deliver our message that we have? Simplicity. Is that what we need to be more effective, to reach more people, to get out there more?
Yeah, simplicity. Remember, the messenger is the message as well. How you present yourself is going to have a much more tangible effect on the way people perceive you and what you're saying than what you're actually saying. The reason why the left has been so successful isn't due to their arguments. It's due to the people spreading the arguments. Things like Live 8, for example, Bob Geldof getting all of these musicians, these very talented people, well, talented, subjective, I suppose, but getting all these very high status people pushing the message, regardless of what the message is going to help and support the message. Nationalists, again, need to do the same. They need to apply that logic. Again, I've said this before, but be careful about the beliefs you attach to nationalism. Keep it simple. Don't bother going down tangents. Don't bother with revisionism and things like that. They're very interesting. And if you're interested in that, go ahead, do it, but don't attach it to your nationalism. Another thing as well, don't be rational in your beliefs. That may sound ridiculous, but be as pragmatic as possible. Think, okay, this may be the right thing to do, morally speaking, but is it actually going to help nationalism? And if the answer to that is no, don't do it. Another thing, just be positive, healthy, engaging, lively, interactive. Just enjoy it. Life is play, I think. Don't get wound up. Don't get aggressive. Don't get upset. Don't be depressed. Just have fun. See the struggle as an end in and of itself. Don't see it as a means to anything.
Yeah, and people are not drawn to downers. They want to be with people that are happy and winning and look good and are positive. We're not going to win them over by being down in the dumps all the time, right?
Exactly. And that's why things like TRS and Red Ice, what you're doing, are good. They bring humor, they bring social networks and things like that. People have communities that they can actually engage with rather than being locked up in their bedroom listening to a Screwdriver.
I think, too, we should ride the wave of Brexit and this whole Trump phenomena. And I think a lot of those people, especially when I look at a lot of the Trump people, they're ready for a nationalist message. They're ready to hear what we have to offer. So I think if we can simplify and just kind of start with, step one, I think would be more effective in bringing those people in. What do you think?
Exactly. It basically just shifts the parameters at which discourse can take place. So before it would have been, like Trump mentioned the word nationalist not too long ago in one of his speeches. Now that would have been absolutely unheard of until very, very recently. And it's these little baby steps in shifting the discourse. And it takes a long time, and it's boring, and it's cumbersome, and it's very frustrating, especially when we know that time is not on our side. But it's the only way to do it. It's like Brexit again. I'm not overly enthusiastic about Brexit. I'm enthusiastic in the sense that it happened and the people voted for it, and that's an amazing thing. But the people that didn't vote for it are a much more vocal group of people and have much more political clout than the people that did. The Brexit vote, Kevin MacDonald said, was about implicit whiteness. And I, I don't know if I agree with that. I think it's a battle of whitenesses. A pan-European whiteness that denies itself, a pan-European whiteness that sees it as human, but the category of human in and of itself is a white one, if you'll forgive me dropping that massive thing at this point. But it's a conflict in the interests of various whites. Regardless of anything, it was a white vote. And people on both sides, I've already mentioned before how a leftist white identity is in of itself a white identity. It's just an identity in the fact that it has been denied as one. So
yeah, that's the tricky thing. You know, whites were so damn complicated. We can't just unite like, oh, we're white, let's unite, let's get along. You know what I mean? We have all these little interests and we're so damn picky about everything. So I always wonder, I mean, is it going to be nationalism or is it going to end up being tribalism at this point, you know?
I think tribalism is probably a bit more likely. A long time ago, I wrote an article called Maybe I Should Be on the Left. And one of the points I made in that article is talking about ethnic identity. If I'm discussing these issues with people, I get a much more positive response with it, talking to a non-white person or talking to someone from a sexual minority. And that's because these people understand the need for identity. These people have had to go through historic struggles based on their blackness, based on their gayness, based on their transness, etc. Whereas middle-class whites have never had to do that. And me instantly saying to a middle-class white, you're white, don't you think you have any political interest? Don't you want to mobilize or secure a place in this nation for your future, for your progeny? And that's unheard of to them. But if I talk to a black person about these issues, or talk to a Muslim, or talk to a gay person, then they understand because they have these identity categories and they value them a lot. So then that raises the question is, how practical is this belief in my preservation of whiteness when it is explicit, if it alienates me from the majority of whites? It's a really difficult question to deal with, I think.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And then you have cucks, you know, little white cucks that are just like, no, just don't talk about race. That they have a problem with all those other groups because they are identitarian, like it's a bad thing, right? They look at it like it's bad to have an identity. We should all just get along and just buy the same stuff, right?
Who do you define as cucks in that sentence?
There's a couple people, I mean, cuckonservatives. When I look at American Republicans, that's probably, they're very cuckonservative to me. I don't know how much you follow American politics.
Not so much, but I know what you're referring to, a kind of neocon.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
yeah. I'm sure you're familiar with Sargon of Akkad.
Sure, yeah.
I like him a lot, and a lot of nationalists, I think, like him a lot. Recently, he's been engaging with millennial woes a lot over nationalism and things like that. But the tendency among nationalists is to side a lot more with someone like Sargon of Akkad than the average SJW warrior. And I kind of think nationalists have got that all wrong. SJW warriors are incredibly useful for us. We like them, or we should like them, I think, because at least they acknowledge race. And that's half our argument won for us. They create a white identity by positing whites to be so terrible. Sargon of Akkad, on the other hand, says, no, it's completely irrelevant. Whites shouldn't identify as whites. Blacks shouldn't identify as blacks. We're just people. I think that's going to be more deleterious to what we're trying to do.
Interesting. So how would you even begin to approach an SJW on these issues when a lot of them are blatantly anti-white, right?
They are. I'm not saying approach them. I'm saying, for example, they're putting us in a fortunate position, I'm saying, in terms especially of university establishments. Again, I went to a university that was incredibly left-leaning. I can say without a shadow of a doubt that it is the most left-wing establishment in the UK. It is based in London. Anyone that knows anything about British universities will know which university I was at by me saying that. White people now are being taught to analyze their whiteness, to recognize their whiteness in university establishments. That is a seed that is very important for them to be planting. It helps us to be planting it. The moment a white person recognizes their whiteness, it gives us the opportunity to renegotiate what is constitutive of their whiteness, what makes up their whiteness. If people are denying their whiteness completely, then that's much more difficult for us to approach. Again, it goes back to this why does it matter? Why does it matter question. If I say whites are a minority and someone says, why does it matter? Then I have to go, oh yeah, but you have ethnic identity, you're white, blah, blah, blah. I have to go into a lot more detail. If someone says, yeah, I know, and that's a good thing, I think, okay, at least you recognize that you're white and you could possibly have some interest.
I say, yeah, that's a good way of looking at it.
Try and be positive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's something I always get to. People always say, give me something positive, give me something hopeful, give me solutions. And how I see that is everyone has to do that on their own. You know, it's called a lot of work. I think a lot of people kind of want some magical dictator to come and fix everything, right? A lot of people don't want to do the work, but what the road that we have before us, it's long and it's hard. I mean, we're talking about reigniting our culture again, right? And kind of being trailblazers, and it's going to take a lot of work. What do you think when people come to you and say, tell me something hopeful, give me solutions? What do you say?
There's no hope. I don't think you need hope. Hope is kind of useless because the moment you invoke hope, you're denying your own part. Again, it's like saying you've got to do what you can. Again, if you're talking about hope, you're assuming that everything is out of your control. It's not out of your control. But again, even if everything goes to shit and we fail and our nations decline, irreversibly speaking, and we find ourselves in an absolutely hellish situation, at least you tried, okay? Your hope is useless. Don't ask people for hope. That's not going to solve anything. Just enjoy it and see this whole thing as a game. That's not to trivialize it, but there's honestly nothing else you can do. Just laugh at the spectacle, enjoy the spectacle. What the majority of people do is out of your control. It will always be out of your control. There's little baby steps that you can take. You need to hope that other people, I used the word hope, you need to expect other people to be taking those baby steps also, and that's how change is enacted. Loads of, subtle chipping away of the system.
It's true.
And it's happening now. It's already happening.
And people have to work on your own life, right? You have to work on your own family, your own marriages, build up your own careers, become successful in your own right? Get your own shit together, right? And if everyone did that and you surround yourself by other people like that, then you're going to start to draw other white people who are like, I want that kind of life. I want to be around those kinds of people. We have to basically say this all the time, become who other people want to be like, right?
Exactly. And at present, again, I can draw on my experience in Italy. I've met nationalists in Sweden also, where you're from. They're very healthy, very lively, very charismatic people, very normal people. The situation in the UK is very different from that. The most important thing is to build community. Community in itself is going to create hope because you've got something tangible to cling on to, say, well, this is mine and it's not going anywhere. These people are going to stick by me. That's all you can really do, build community.
It's true. You got to build your tribe. I see a lot of people get kind of gloom and doom, and we got to shake out of that. You got to get that depression out. You have to find friends like you. You have to keep your spirits up. You have to work on it. I think that's very important.
Exactly. And people that are in situations, a lot of people can retort and say, well, there is no one like me. But there are going to be other people out there.
Yeah, of course.
They're going to be the least vocal people, though, because people that are vocal about these, again, we're coming back to the paradox, because the people that tend to be most vocal about these issues are the people with nothing to lose, are the people that are not going to be, this is a huge generalization, and of course there are innumerable very healthy people in nationalism, but the people that are most vocal are probably going to be the people that see themselves as having nothing to lose, and so they may as well.
Yeah.
So remember that the people that you're most likely going to assimilate with, that you're most likely going to get on with, are going to be those that are going to be stepping back, aren't going to be saying anything, but they're out there. It's just up to you to find them.
Now, do you have a pretty good network? Are you connecting with other people your age, other nationalists around Europe? Or is there a pretty good network? Or is it pretty much just you have one in Italy, one in England? Or are they all coming together at times? I know Generation Identity has planned some events where people from other countries have come and attended.
I can't really speak on that too much. I have a fair few friends in England that are nationalists. It's quite a close-knit group. There's the Legion camp as well in England. I advise anyone listening to this that is based in the UK, that is interested in hiking, martial arts, things like that, to attend a Legion camp, Legion Mac. If you Google search that, you will find us. That's an incredibly positive development in England, so I would advise anyone again to get in touch and try and take part in that. In Italy as well, since being here, I've made a lot of contacts at Casa Pound. Again, I can't stress enough, you have to be proactive. You can't expect these people to find you. You need to go looking for them.
Yep. Well, last question for you. I want to get your take. Politics. We need to get involved, right? We need to get a foothold in there. Of course, Europe, we have to take back our governments or try and get in there. What are your thoughts on the political system? Do you think nationalists have a chance to get in there? Is that likely? Is it ever going to happen?
It's becoming increasingly unlikely. And as time passes, due to demographics alone, it's going to become an impossibility, I think. London, for example, will never have a Conservative mayor again.
Yeah.
That is an incredibly unlikely scenario. The same is going to apply to places like Birmingham, Manchester, Bradford, major cities throughout the UK. And there is very, very little hope politically of doing that. So on that basis alone, I think you're wasting your time with democratic politics. This isn't to say the situation is hopeless. I'm not really suggesting that, but I'm saying that there are more proactive ways to mobilize white people. Again, to come back to building community, that's the most important thing. That's the only way you're really going to serve white interests. The only way it's going to happen is if whites start voting as a demographic bloc. And the Brexit vote proves, I mean, it was pretty much a 50-50 split. That kind of proves that whites are definitely not acting as a demographic bloc. They are very, very split. And so the chances of finding a community where whites make up a significant minority, but not the majority, and also all those whites are going to be voting in tandem with each other, is very unlikely. But I don't see that as necessarily hopeless, Lana. I don't really see that as a terrible thing in and of itself. Democracy hasn't changed anything. In the last 20 years or so, Britain hasn't changed substantially due to parliamentary democracy. The Labour government themselves admitted that between, I think it was 1997 and 2004 or some such period, that they purposefully imported millions of immigrants to rub the right's nose in.
Yeah, I remember that.
As they say explicitly. So they know exactly what they're doing, and they're trying to make it an impossibility. We basically need to show them that it doesn't really matter, and that actually real political power isn't at the ballot box, it's on the ground. It's boots on the ground, it's people sticking together and helping each other. You've got to build parallel systems.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Sharia law courts, the answer.
Yeah, wasn't it, you just had, was it Theresa May? Was it Theresa May that just said that about that Britons could benefit greatly from Sharia law?
Yeah. British Muslims could benefit greatly. But to be honest, British Muslims, this again raises a problem, because British Muslims do benefit greatly from Sharia law courts because they're able to preserve their cultural identity through British law courts. Sharia law courts. They're able to preserve who they are through Sharia law courts. So they kind of do, probably for the complete opposite reasons that Theresa May is saying, but they do. And I have a problem with people on the right saying, oh no, we should really object to Sharia law courts because they're so horrible for these Muslim women, etc. Don't concern yourself with Muslim women. They're irrelevant to us. I don't really care what the plight is of Muslim women, to be honest. That's their issue in their communities. I don't want to dabble. I don't want to get involved in the identity politics of other ethnic groups. Sharia law courts, whatever. As long as they're confined to Islamic people doing their Islamic thing, fine. I don't care.
Man, England is just getting so crowded, though. I think all these people need to go home eventually. And okay, war's over, everybody. Go back home, right?
It's not going to happen, though, Lana.
Ever? You think it'll ever happen? I mean, Europe's dealt with invasions before, right? Muslim invasions, and they've chased people out before. I know these are different times. I know. Mm-hmm. You don't think that's ever going to happen, though?
It would need such a monumental shift in affect in Western people to suddenly regard it as ethical to uproot people, some of which have been here for more than one generation, a lot of which were born here. The problem of where do you send them, the logistical issues. It's a possibility, and it's not one that I'm ethically against if the situation continues to deteriorate. But I think, for example, to take America, repatriation in America isn't going to happen. You're not going to get an all-white or a vast majority white America. Again, people are going to segment into different communities. Either that will happen through secession or that will happen naturally, as it already is. Same shit in London. White flight, of course, is a huge issue. 600,000 white British have fled London in the last 10 years or so alone. So I don't think it will become necessary. Unfortunately, I think we're going to be in a situation where it will be tribalistic mostly. The ideal situation in that instance is tribalistic communities that get on quite well, are able to interact with each other, but are able to maintain those degrees of separation because they recognize that ultimately that separation is necessary for harmony. And this is the thing. People need to respect differences. People need to respect separation. Anyone that says humans are the same and can and should live together and not place importance on these categories, on these cultural differences, is immoral as far as I can see. They're denying the right of these groups to exist.
I just have to ask, I mean, as an Englishman, doesn't it drive you mad at times? I know you're not there right now, but when you see what's happening to your country, I mean, what do you think when you walk down the streets of London now? I mean, how does one not feel completely peeved about it?
Especially someone that lives in London or lived in London. You can't feel peeved about it though, Lana. You've got to numb yourself to it because then everything else goes out the window and you just kind of want to just throw in the towel and think, forget it, because the situation...
Or just rage, yeah.
Or just rage. And again, that's not going to help us. Any act of violence is only going to hinder our efforts. I think treat people as people, be as civil as you can be, and try and get on with your life. Again, build communities, stick by your own. It's not going to help anyone to talk about how terrible the situation is. It's really not. So I'd rather not talk about the visceral emotional responses that walking through the streets of London can incite.
Yeah, it's true. It can wear you out. It wears you out. That is definitely true. You have to be careful where you poise your mind.
Hate is a very, very tiring emotion.
There is a good time and place for it, but you don't want it every day when you're out running errands. You know, it's just like, yay. You know,
I'm going to buy some milk. I don't want to be invoking thoughts of genocide in my brain.
Yeah, exactly. I have to say, though, I've been thinking about it a lot, and sometimes I have nightmares about it, you know, thinking, oh my God, what if there was no white country on the planet? What if everything just turned into like third world danger? You know, that just freaks me out. But I know we're not going to let that happen. There's pockets of us that are way too smart for that.
But especially when it comes to things like I'm 24, no thoughts of children yet. But especially when I think about my future, do I want to have children? Do I want to have grandchildren? Of course, the best thing any indigenous European can do is have children. That's the most important thing to do. But then I think, but going to school, being around the society as it currently stands.
Get that out of your head. Get that out of your head. If our ancestors can do it, you can do it, right? Build community, and then you can have a good village help raise the kids, right?
Exactly.
All right. Well, any closing thoughts? I know I definitely want you to share your website and your YouTube channel and tell us what you have going on. And
no closing thoughts, really. I've exhausted myself. But you can find me on YouTube, State of Nation, all one word. Talk to me. I'm incredibly lonely.
Yeah, but you have a girlfriend, right? So, okay. Well, thanks so much. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed it, and we'll have to do it again sometime, okay?
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Lana.
Yang offers a fresh perspective and maintains an overall lightness about him. The trick is to not become a Debbie Downer when discussing what looks like a grim future for white people. We're not going to win over newcomers with a down-in-the-dumps attitude. It's one thing to assess the negative aspects, but it's another thing to be defeatist about them. I, for one, refuse to give up and say it's over. White people are survivors. We've been through a lot and will continue to thrive against all odds. Just look at our amazing history so far. We've achieved things that no other people have. Speaking from a woman's perspective, no woman wants to be with the guy with a downer outlook. She wants to be with a strong man who can offer a vision for a prosperous future. One who can laugh in the face of the enemy and blaze a path to a better world. Sure, things are pretty gloom when we look around, but there's good things happening as well. Let's face it, our people have needed a good shaking, a good slap in the face. We've become complacent, out of touch with nature, and unfit in so many ways. We can use what is happening now to ignite a fire once again in our people. We aren't the people in the weak position. We're not the ones crying to other nations to take care of us like so many foreigners crawling to our countries. We can build something better, and I'm happy to be a pioneer in that new civilization because this one has become toxic to our people. So be glad it's going down, and we'll take the best with us. It's important to simplify. Let's go back to the basics to win over so many disgruntled European people looking for a tribe looking for answers and wanting solutions. We can provide that to them. So I think it is wise when trying to win over newcomers to cut out the advanced topics they can come to later. I know we're getting it from every angle possible, but when winning over new people, keep it simple. Teach the basics of mass immigration into white countries, the lie of multiculturalism, and the double standards imposed only on white people. When talking to new people, keep it simple and repeat it. It really can break the spell. Get them hooked, then refer them to shows like this one and many others. Thanks for listening, and please consider signing up for a Red Ice membership to get full access and help us grow. We need your help. There's so much work to do, and I'm full of ideas and what to do, but we need the manpower and the resources. RedIceMembers.com is where you can go to sign up. RedIce.tv is the website where we host all our free content, which is most of what we do.